All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? It is now 25 years after the release of American Psycho, a movie that has been, memed on and joked about. And I think you and I can both agree, Brian, that the purpose and point of that movie has been very well understood by the people that have watched it. Would you agree with that?
It's fucking based, and it teaches you to not be a pussy or a little bitch. Basically, you can make your life good and cool if you just do things for yourself and you just focus on what you want. You go for it, you get it, you listen to good music like Huey Lewis, you get lots of money, you fuck chicks. I've only seen about the first third of American Psycho, but I about got it.
Yes, exactly. I couldn't agree more, Brian. And it turns out there is something that we haven't really talked about in the show too much outside of, I think, one movie so far, but a blaxploitation remake of American Psycho, cleverly called African American Psycho. Have you heard of this movie, Brian?
I heard about it just like last week in preparation for this episode, but I gotta say, as soon as you told me the title, I was like, oh, of course that exists. This is clearly a premise where like something was going on, and the title of the movie came into the filmmaker's head. And he went, well, I have to make that movie.
Yes, 100%. So this week we're going to be watching the to-be original movie, African American Psycho, parentheses or parenthetically, the hip-hop freak.
The use of the word freak is important there. It is the first of many very unsubtle tips of the hat. But right off the bat, very deliberate choice of word.
Yes, 100%. But before we get into our review this week, Brian, let's bring back our segment, Cringe Generational Cringe Millennium of the Week.
Cringe Generational Moment of the Week.
Woo! Yeah! All right. And, we've been joking about this movie. It is called African American Psycho, parenthetically, the hip hop freak. But you know what? There's not really much to talk about in this movie. Like, the least amount of research I've ever had to do for anything here. There is literally nothing to really discuss until we get to the synopsis here. So we're going to do something I think we're going to be doing, I think, for the first time ever. We're going to do a Cringe Millennial Generational segment. We're each going to do one because we need to fill up this episode with some content.
Literally, yeah.
So, considering it's my week, I'll go first, and then, Brian, I know you have one that's very relevant to this series, but...
Oh, it's a thing I've wanted to talk about for a while, and I finally had an excuse.
Oh, hell yeah. So, mine is not related to this movie at all, but it is something that involves a very cringe local event. So, this week, as of recording, we are recording this the first full week of May of 2025. I want to talk a little bit about the Deep Thought boat fiasco. Now, Brian, I told you about this today. Were you familiar with this fiasco at all?
Until today, I was not.
All right, so to the audience at home who may or may not know, I currently live in the greatest city, otherwise known as German Athens, as they used to call it, which is hilarious. But I currently live in the Milwaukee area. I'm not going to say I live in the city because it's technically not true, and I also don't want to dox myself, but that's not here nor there. Either way, though, the Deep Thought is a boat that was bought by a Mississippi couple in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, otherwise known as the Making a Murderer town.
Yeah.
And this Mississippi couple bought it in October, drove it for 2 days. They ran out of gas and they beached it in Milwaukee. And ever since then, they dipped. Even though it's their responsibility to pay to get the fucking boat out of the marina, they just disappeared off the face of the earth. So now the city is funding the removal of this. And they have now failed, I believe, at least 3 times to get this boat out of the fucking marina.
This is awesome because a thing that you will learn in the part of Wisconsin where we grew up, people fucking hate what they refer to as tourists. Do you remember this, Taylor? People around Green Bay or, even farther up north where I grew up, do you remember people talking about tourists every summer? And that was the word they would use. I hate tourists, all the tourists. There are no tourists in Wisconsin, right? It's not really a thing like that.
It is definitely a thing, Brian. I'm going to be honest with you. Now, I'm not talking about, it's not like Disneyland or whatever with tourism,
no.
But there are people from Illinois, there are people from everywhere in the U.S. that come to Wisconsin every year, especially during the summer. Door County, Minocqua,
that's
Lake
what
Geneva,
What I mean
Wisconsin
is,
Dells.
Like, they're talking about, like, slummers or squatters. Like,
yeah,
they're talking about
other Midwesterners, basically, yeah.
Yeah, they're not talking about people that are coming in. Like, they're using the word tourist because it's the easiest word to bob out, but they're talking about, like, land leeches, right? They're not even talking about people who are visiting and, like, taking in the sights and touring. They're talking about people who are, like, pretending they live there for the nice months out of the summer. It's not a tourism industry. It's literally, like, more urbane Midwesterners, whatever that means Mississippians coming in and feeling like they live like off the fucking land. This is so like those people to me, and not like for the same reason, but it's so like that type of thing. Like, we're gonna beach this in Milwaukee. Obviously, we can do whatever we want in fucking Wisconsin.
No, honestly, Brian, when you clarified it, you are totally correct. I totally agree. And it depends where you go in Wisconsin. Like, for example, my brother-in-law, they live in a town. Well, I'm not going to say exactly where they live, but they live in Marinette County, basically. And their derogatory term for them are called shackers because they have hunting shacks.
Shackers is good. I grew up in really, like I said, further up north, kind of a cluster of very small towns. Everyone called them tourists. They're just slightly wealthier people that buy all the nice houses that are in these shitty impoverished areas. They're like lakeside houses, and then they hang out for 6 weeks out of the year and act like they're a really quaint and small townie. And this isn't exactly the same, but something about this dumbass couple buying their stupid fucking boat and just beaching it in my fucking state.
Well, also Mississippi, by the way, because, like, I don't know if you've been really paying attention to, like, the local political atmosphere in the state, but, like, Republicans want to turn this state into fucking Mississippi. They really want to turn the state into Mississippi. Like, it's crazy. So, like, when a couple from Mississippi come here and do this shit, it really pisses me off, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, well, you're seeing it right now. It's kicked into overdrive because, and you and I have talked about this for years, just not for the podcast, but personally, is, like, Wisconsin is, like, kind of, like, was, like, the practice state for, like, the GOP, like, gerrymandering strategy, right? That they've successfully implemented.
Teachers union shit.
Yeah, they've successfully implemented in a lot of other parts of the country, but that's like almost this marvel of engineering where for generations they were able to, while having a minority of the population, basically fucking run the electoral mechanism. And you're starting to see, surprisingly, given the climate of the overall country, in Wisconsin, you are seeing moreover like pushback to that, because I think people are just sick of it. But I think in response to that pushback, you are seeing, this really, I hate saying like it's like draconian or that it's like some like, but this really retrograde kind of conservatism that is, it's different from the traditional Wisconsin conservatism, which would kind of play its hand at being kind of populist and be like, that was your thing with like your fucking Scott Walker thing. It's like, oh, we're not like the big states that have all this money. I'm just a normal guy like you, and we're like these humble Wisconsin people, and that's why we keep everything. It was like that kind of conservatism. And I think what you're seeing them push out a lot more is a much more Trumpian kind of like conservatism, right? It's a lot of like bluster and it's a lot of finger wagging. I don't think it'll play well in Wisconsin. It already hasn't so far, as much as I've observed, but this is very like people outside of Wisconsin coming in and being, well, let's just leave our shit here. Let's leave our stupid fucking boat here. And the city's just stuck with it. Although, like, why is it taking them so long to get rid of it? Like, what's the big fucking deal? Just get rid of it.
Well, it's crazy too, because like this city basically runs on like towing people's cars. Like, I don't know if you know this, tow lots in the city on average charge some of the highest rates in the country because it's one of the few major cities that doesn't have any regulations on tow rates. So it's one of those things where like you would think that there would be, I think there's so much graft going on because they were like, I don't know, contracting this tow company and they gave them $20,000 and then their supplies broke on the sand. I was at the site today. It's literally just like a rocky overface of like maybe 20 feet long and just a little bit of sand. This shouldn't be that fucking complicated. It really shouldn't be that complicated.
That's what's so strange to me. I'm like, why it's still there? It's just going to be there forever. It's just like, what, a monument now?
It should be. Honestly, if this was any other city, if this was like Portland, they probably would just make it into a local monument and just leave it the fuck alone, which is what they should do, to be honest with you.
They might be better off at this point.
Yeah, seriously. So, yeah, that whole fiasco is a fucking mess. But you know what, Brian? I know you have a fiasco to talk about, so I'm really excited to hear yours because I just listened to it for the first time about 20 minutes ago. And it is, oh boy.
This is the thing I've wanted to talk about for a while as a segment for the show. It's not millennial. It's a very Gen X thing. I guess it came out in 2000. The people that would most likely have been listening to it would have been Gen Xers or the oldest millennials. So it's a skit track by a rap group called The Lox. And I think about it a lot over the last year or so. So The Lox put out an album. The Lox, first of all, pretty hard band. Like, they're gangster rap. It's very lyrical, very aggro, a lot of kind of catchy, beats, but like very shouted kind of, aggro, like in your face vocalizations. They were signed to a record label called Bad Boy, a record label that nobody's heard of, nobody remembers, didn't put out a lot of music, didn't really have too many hits in like the 90s or the 2000s. And the record was pretty successful, but publicly, the Lox said they were uncomfortable with being on Bad Boy. Their public reason for this most overtly was they said, like, we don't really fit in with the roster. Bad Boy does, like, kind of melodic, poppy R&B. It does club hits. It's kind of pop rap, and we want to be someplace that's harder, that's more like street, fits more with our aesthetic and where we come from. And they tried to get out of their contract with Bad Boy. It was pretty public feud, which was unusual at the time with things like this. But basically, they contested also, well, their public reason was they had problems with the aesthetic of Bad Boy. They felt like they didn't fit in there. Came out is that they had issues with where their royalties were going. They didn't have their publishing rights. They felt they were misled by the label, which is kind of all we hear about it. It goes on for a while. The Lox managed to liberate themselves from Bad Boy Records after failing in court by just going public with it. Because they're a pretty popular group, right? They start wearing shirts and selling shirts that say "Free the Lox," and then their fan base becomes aware of this. So Bad Boy, to avoid like all the backlash, voluntarily lets them go. 2 years later, so they sat in with Rough Riders. That's DMX's label. 2 years later, they put out their follow-up, and there's a skit on it. Skits are a thing skits are things that used to happen in hip-hop, in rap. It's kind of a weird thing now, I understand. I think probably to like younger people it seems really strange, but we did comedy skits. So either comedy skits, sometimes they're like political skits, spoken word things that broke up the album. I've always liked them. They're kind of little time capsules. Sometimes they're really funny, sometimes they help an album thematically. But this was a weird skit. It's on their first album away from Bad Boy Records. It was called Rapin' You Records. Basically, the skit is kind of like you're hearing a lot of voices talking over each other, kind of like an informal business meeting house party. And one of the voices is saying, like, we need to sign you to our label. We're going to make you stars. You're about to drop. You're about to get hot. And the other voices are the members of the Lox saying, well, yeah, we want to do this and this and this. And then our other voice says, yeah, but, you can't let anyone else sign you. I need to sign you because I need to be able to rape you. And the voices of the Lox start to go, wait, what? And he goes, well, I need to be able to rape you. If you're going to be my artist, I got to be able to rape your publishing. I got to be able to rape your royalties. I got to be, what's he say? If you bring your best girl to a show, I got to be able to rape her. And you're kind of thinking like, okay, this is obviously metaphorical about Bad Boy Records, but it's kind of weird, right? And it keeps going on.
Well, at the time, it's basically edge for edge's sake, but it turned out to be more accurate than we would like to let on.
Because it culminates in Jadakiss, I believe. Jadakiss was a member of the Lox.
I heard his voice, and I'm like, is that fucking Jadakiss?
That's Jadakiss going, and he says, we'll be raping you. And you're kind of like, this is weird. And you're like, okay, it's a metaphor for like how record labels are predatory. I get it, but it's a little uncomfortable. And then the track ends, and it moves on to the rest of the album, which is, again, a pretty hard, fast-flowing, catchy rap album. But you're kind of thinking, like, that Raping You Records thing was either really, like you said, a really overly edgy social commentary, or it was just, like, way too heavy-handed. You're, like, not sure what to make of it, right? Like, what could that be about?
No, exactly. But you know what it could be about, Brian, is I think the subject of this episode. So let's get right into the fucking details. So this is once again African American Psycho, parenthetically the hip hop freak. It was released last year in 2024. Of course, it was not rated by the MPA. Would you believe it, Brian? This doesn't have an MPA rating.
It's barely a movie. And I'm not saying that derisively. I'm just like,
it's not a feature film. This is 58 minutes long. It's on YouTube for free. But it is technically a movie. Technically. It was directed by a gentleman by the name of Alvin Gray. It was written by him as well. It was produced by Christopher Dodds, Alvin Gray, and Rena Gray. And Alvin Gray is a writer, director, and producer. And some of his credits, Brian, include, and did you look up any of his credits? Because they're hilarious.
I did not. I should have.
So he is, once again, a writer, director, producer. He's been involved with such movies as The Actor That Got Chased Around the City, which I'm guessing is about, who is that guy who faked the hate crime? Jussie Smollett. I think it's about Jussie Smollett, I'm going to guess.
Yeah. I hope so.
Another one is The Wife That Didn't Know Who She Married. The next one is The Rapper Who Got Shot in the Heel.
Is that about like Meg the Stallion?
Yep, 100%. And another one, and this one's the funniest to me, is The Nurse That Saw the Baby on the Highway. What the fuck is that about? That's the thing, Brian, is that these, we talked about in another episode about Irish movies, about how they're like, their titles are so short and evocative. This is the opposite of evocative. They just tell you what's going to happen.
This is like, so I was going to save this till later on in the discussion, but this is a good point to bring it up. This felt to me less like a movie, like someone making a film, and more kind of reminded reminded me of like a content creator, like hopping on like a hot topic, right? This kind of felt more like, but obviously it's a movie, it's a short film, but in its presentation, it made me think more of like YouTube clickbait, where you're like scrolling and then you see the thumbnail and then you see like African American Psycho, the hip hop freak, and there's something like going on in like the salacious and current in the news that makes you think like, oh, I've got to watch this to see what's going on. Like it felt less like someone's passionate filmmaking and more like just content creation. And hearing that those are his other films, I feel like that really backs that up.
You know what this really reminds me of, Brian, is that this really reminds me of a direct-to-video movie, which is obviously what it is, directed by somebody like Uli Lamel, who is somebody who would see popular titles and just basically make knockoffs of them that were like extremely low budget and very bad, so people would get confused, almost like an Asylum movie. That's what this feels like.
It's like an Asylum picture, but instead of, well, I mean, I guess this is kind of like an Asylum knockoff of American Psycho, but kind of is like, it's less a knockoff of the feature, and it's more about like dick riding on a current event that, again, is really salacious and has a lot of people's attention and kind of is like a car wreck.
Yes, just like the rapper that got shot in the heel, which is, I would 125% guarantee you is about Megan Thee Stallion, because who else could it be about? It could be about nobody else.
That is such a specific title that it's kind of shameless, right?
At least African American Psycho, parentheses, the hip hop freak, is at least an interesting title, to be honest, even though it is stupid.
Well, like, it at least has the pretense of being a parody or like kind of a statement on an iconic film. And that's the other thing that, I don't know, maybe I'll let you get into the plot before I get more into it, because there are a few things that bothered me about this movie.
And then some other credits here. So Christopher Dodds is really only known for this. And there was some series that I saw that was literally, it was like a black guy in like assless chaps on IMDb. And I'm like, that is gay porn. That is the only thing this guy's been involved in otherwise. And then Rena Gray, I'm assuming, is like his wife or relative or something. And she's only been involved in his shit too. And once again, I mentioned this movie's 58 minutes long. It had a budget of $80,000. That was what was reported on IMDb, which, to be honest with you, it looks like it cost $80,000. I can genuinely believe that. Not like with fucking Axum that he got $250,000 in debt. For $80,000 for a film made 2 years ago, I can believe it. It looks like it cost $80,000 to get everybody in here in all the locations.
So the film, I mean, we're going to be fucking making fun of it. We have thoughts on it, I'm sure, but it's pretty competent for what it is.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Like, even though, this is not a good film, obviously, but this is a competently well-made movie. It does tell the story. It retells the story of American Psycho more competently than you would ever expect. Like,
exactly. The performances are not bad. I think he did pay these actors because, again, they're okay.
Yeah, exactly. They're perfectly competent actors. So yeah, when I saw $80K, I'm like, I can believe that. I wouldn't believe $180,000, but I could believe $80,000.
I won't go so far as to say that you see every dollar on screen, but I believe that it was spent on the film.
Exactly. I can believe that this cost the roughly yearly salary of a mid-range registered nurse. I can believe that.
Yeah. How's that make you feel?
Yeah, right. On Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, you were working. You could have been making African American Psycho. Yeah. What a fool you are.
Oh, Jesus. I could have went to nursing school and gotten that shit done.
You could have been a contender.
I could have, yeah. So with all the details out of the way, let's get real quick into the synopsis. So once again, this is a fairly straightforward retelling of American Psycho, told through the eyes of Sean Brush, a.k.a.
Can I say his name?
City.
B-City.
So obviously this is the most thinly disguised allegory for P. Diddy's life. It is so thinly veiled, it is like nanometers thick, thinly veiled.
I kept waiting for like halfway through the film for like characters to just forget that he had a different name and just start calling him Diddy.
You know, this reminds me a lot of this, and I know we've talked about it on the show before, but this gay porn movie we reviewed on my old podcast as a joke. And in that movie, there's a blooper where because it's a Harry Potter themed like gay porno, and he calls him, Ron Weasley by accident. He's like, no, you have to say Wheezy, otherwise we're going to get sued. I was waiting for that scene to happen.
I was legit waiting for it. And obviously this is an exploitation film. Taylor and I were talking about it before we started recording. This is like an exploitation film in the truest sense. Something is happening in the moment. People are talking about it. They've cranked out this low budget movie about it because they know people are going to watch it. And it's more about like the marketing campaign and the current relevance to the moment than, the film itself.
No, absolutely, yeah. So, and without getting too in-depth with every scene, but, it starts off with B City, attending a birthday celebration. You can see he's got this, like, deep, like, seething fucking anger in him. And then we get a recreation of the opening scene from American Psycho where he's, like, doing his exercises and his, like, face scrub or whatever. And there's a line in there that's really funny where he goes, I have houses and condos all over the country, but I love Baltimore the most. And I'm like, nobody has ever said that. Nobody's ever said Baltimore is their favorite place they've lived. Outside of Stavros Halkias from Town.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever said that. I don't even know if Michael or Kume believe that.
Well,
which is interesting.
John Waters.
Real quick, though. John Waters, okay, very fair. But real quick though, Brian, I think it's interesting that this is like, I would say, because it's the only like second blaxploitation movie we've ever seen. Because Axum was first, right?
Those are the only ones we've done for the show. Yes.
And they both take place in Baltimore. That's interesting, isn't it?
It's funny that it turned out that way, not in like Atlanta or
like fucking New York City or LA or Chicago even. It has to be Baltimore.
Yeah, they're Baltimore centric. Well, we're doing our part to show the way an underrepresented city and an underrepresented demographic of that city.
And I also love when they do the face scrub thing and it's clear it wasn't working, so they just cut. Because in the original, like the face scrub comes off in one piece, but for him, he's like trying as hard as he can, but he gets like two molecules at a time.
Yeah, and it's awesome. Kind of about to break at any moment.
It's so fucking funny. And then some other scenes is he's at his headquarters at, was it Good Boy Records? I can't even say these things with a straight face. Boy. They're so stupid.
But they fuck up and they have him wearing a jersey that says bad boy at multiple points.
Yeah, with who is it, Biggie on the back, right? Or no,
it
Smalls.
Says Smalls. It says Smalls.
And then also, I'm sure as you noticed in the scene, there are posters for this director's other movies in there, like the rapper that got shot in the heel and the nurse that saw a baby on the highway or whatever the fuck.
That's awesome because those are like parodies of like a movie. Those are like, if there was a 30 Rock episode about a director that made movies like these, those are the movies he would make.
Well, that's the thing, Brian, is that you never show a better movie in your movie.
Yeah, these are movies that Tracy Jordan would be in 30 Rock.
Oh, geez. And then we get some other scenes. We eventually meet Casey, who's supposed to be the Cassie stand-in, of course, who, I mean, she's very fucking hot in this movie. And they actually got an actress who mostly looks like Cassie.
Yeah.
So they did a pretty good job of getting people outside of one character we'll get into very shortly. He also gets massaged by an extremely morbidly obese woman. I'm not sure if that's like a reference to something specific. I mean, obviously,
it's
B-City is obviously the hip-hop freak.
Obesity?
Yeah, obese. Oh, okay, that's got to be it. If that's what it is, that's actually
I don't
genius.
think
I like
so. That's got to be a Diddy reference that I just don't know.
No, it does. And then we eventually meet a gentleman who goes by Blake, who's supposed to be the Drake stand-in, who looks, this is the one that they didn't even really try very hard. Like, he honestly looks more like fucking T-Pain than he does Drake.
Yeah. If someone came up to you looking like that guy and said it was their Drake costume.
So then eventually he kills him like Christian Bale kills Jared Leto in the actual American Psycho. And it's really funny because he's like putting on the outfit to murder him and he's like dancing down the stairs like Diddy. It's actually my favorite scene in the movie because it makes me laugh so hard. Yeah. Because this actor, he is trying. He is putting an effort.
Well, yeah, he got a starring role. He's got to go for it.
No, absolutely. And I will say too, this actor, he does actually, we talk about competent. He does a really competent job of acting like Diddy. He does pretty good. He looks like him too, honestly.
So one of the good things I want to say about this movie, he does a good job of, at times when he's around other people, acting like Diddy. He also does an okay job of acting kind of in his intimate moments like a psychopath. Who's the fucking guy from American Psycho?
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale. He's not like on that like caliber of it. But for what this movie is, he's doing a pretty good job of capturing that emotion, which is pretty hard to capture. And yeah, when he's like with other people, when he's in business meetings, social events, he does kind of talk like Diddy, which is, not, I think, an easy thing to mimic because the guy has a very specific kind of cadence and verbiage.
Yeah, exactly. And I talked about obviously the seething like anger and like fucking sociopathy and psychopathy going on.
Yeah.
Like, he does a pretty good job of doing that because Diddy is definitely not the easiest person to impersonate because he's such an alien person.
Yeah,
he's so
exactly.
Off-putting. He's been off-putting for like 25
and he always has
years.
Been. Yeah, he always has been. And people who have been into rap, I don't mean like in the scene because like who knew him because I don't know, but like people who who are fans of music, that's always been the thing is like there's a lot of rappers and a lot of producers who right, are very charismatic and kind of fun to listen to talk, and they're, especially from that era, that 90s, 2000s era. But Diddy was always, I feel like, kind of a personality, a big personality in a different way. Kind of soft-spoken, kind of pushy in a weird way rather than in a tough or like boisterous way. I think there's a lot of people who always were like, God, this guy acts weird. And then as more things came out about him, you were like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, he's like a fucking psychopathic sex predator. That's basically. And then, they show some other scenes. Like there's one point where he murders a homeless man for asking for cigarettes. He blows up the car of Boy Cuddy, who obviously we know that's the Kid Cudi stand-in. And obviously in real life, we don't know for sure that Diddy did that.
He absolutely did it. He absolutely
100%
did
it. There's no question. But in the movie, they show the gas canister on his fucking desk or whatever. And, the scenes of him doing his, like, for what this movie could afford, like his sort of freak-off things going on with Cassie and stuff like that, and him watching her have sex with other men against her will, and a lot of gross stuff that goes on, and then eventually he kills the guy who fucks Cassie, and just it's basically a recreation once again of American Psycho, but through the eyes of P. Diddy, which I do think is interesting, right? Because I saw a comment on YouTube that described this perfectly. Is that if they're trying to do a blaxploitation remake of American Psycho, obviously a lot of white people see investment bankers or stock traders or whatever as like an aspirational figure of wealth to a certain degree, right? But who is aspirational wealth to a lot of Black Americans? Athletes and musicians. So if you're trying to portray somebody who would be the African American Psycho, it would be a high profile musician or entertainer or athlete.
Well, and that's kind of where I want to get into, like, I'm going to judge this film for what it's in. It's a direct-to-video, low-budget film. We've said there are things about it we think are pretty good. I want to get into, I think, my big problem with this, which is, if you wanted to do, like, we're not, like, the best people to talk about this. If you wanted to do literally African-American Psycho, and you could make it about Diddy, you could make it about kind of a composite of maybe you make it a little bit about Diddy, and a little bit about R. Kelly, and a little bit about Jay-Z, and you take different things from those three guys, who, of course, their careers overlapped at multiple times, but you could probably make a really interesting film about, like, kind of the 2000s, like, Black capitalist. The person that comes up out of the, like, again, I feel embarrassed saying this. I don't think I'm the best person ever. Someone that comes out of the radical tradition of, like, rap and hip-hop and kind of takes that aesthetic and melts it to, like, this kind of, like, bootstraps kind of businessman, grindset mind, which would be kind of more like a Jay-Z thing. If you took some of that and then you take, like, the Diddy R. Kelly sexual degeneracy thing, you could probably make a really interesting equivalent, a blaxploitation American Psycho. And obviously this film, it's not a feature film. It's very low budget. Maybe I'm not being fair here. That's a really good premise, I feel. And there's a lot of filmmakers who I think could do really well with it, both young and old. And this film doesn't really ever take advantage of the potential of that premise, I think.
No, I totally fucking agree. And I have my final thought in just one moment. I do want to just recap. So the movie essentially ends with the, CCTV footage of Cassie getting the shit beat out of her by Diddy, and then his public apology that he put out. And then, it's literally just that. But I also do want to mention one real quick thing about the credits, is that they do I think what they're doing is a recreation, because they obviously didn't want to get sued by doing the Joker. But when Diddy had the Halloween costume of the Joker, watching that shit is scary. He does an insane good job, and it's so creepy because for a fact he's like, and we talked about that with, I think that was, which band was that? Horror, when you talked about how like they had that like Joker thing, or they like think like, oh yeah, the Joker's actually like really cool or whatever, or they might be the kind of guys that would do that. But Jay-Z is also that guy who's like, I really am the fucking Joker, I'm sick and fucking twisted, and he dressed up in the costume and he does a disgustingly good job, and I'm like, oh my god, this is really horrifying to watch.
It's also the thing, that's the clip where he runs into Tyler the Creator and he's flagging Tyler down and like kind of bothering him, and Tyler like wants to get away from him, you can tell. So
100%. And by the way, if you unsettle Tyler the Creator, you did a pretty good job. I'll say that unintentionally.
I think when you see that clip, and this isn't about the movie, that is absolutely what they're referencing with him in the fucking clown suit. What is happening there when we watch it now, right, is Diddy knows why it's fucked up for him to be dressed as the Joker, and Tyler might even know that. None of us at the time that video came out knew that, really, right? So So we're watching the two of them share in the knowledge that like, oh, I'm actually dressed up like the Joker, but it's not some funny thing. I'm like really bad. And I know it and you know it. And no one else is going to see this and put that together. And that's part of the dynamic. You see that a lot. Whenever like these really elaborate sex predator things come out, especially about famous people, about entertainers, people will look back and they'll go, oh, there's all these weird coincidences that are funny. And it's like, well, yeah, it's because they enjoy doing stuff like that. I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but you see that a lot. Like, I've listened to a lot of music by R. Kelly. There's a lot of old R. Kelly lyrics that at the time people were like, oh, that's kind of funny. Boy, that sounds weird that he wrote that. And it wasn't like some mistake that he wrote that. Like, he was doing it on purpose, like to put it in people's face. And I think that's what Diddy's doing in his
That's part of the sexual sadism. That's part of the sexual sadism. Like, and that's basically all sadists to a certain degree, is that they like flaunting what they feel like they can get away with. And, it talked about, obviously, R. Kelly, age ain't nothing but a number. And, obviously the references later on in his career after the P-tape thing came out, which, by the way, that was just a piece of child porn that was just widely distributed.
You could buy them, obviously, from bootleggers on the street. You could buy it at Tower Records for a while.
Yeah, literal child pornography. Like, and we're not even being like obtuse. She was like 14 or 15 when that was made.
That is a child sex tape. And yeah, it was just sold. People would show it as like a party favor. But there's things. So I think I might have even talked about this on the show before. But R. Kelly, when he was first like going to trial, when the civil suit was happening for the P tape, he put out a single only called "Heaven I Need a Hug." It is actually musically a pretty beautiful song, kind of retro 70s soul, funky guitar, these really lush kind of orchestral, really heavenly strings, and it's like a gospel song where he's singing to his mother, and he's also singing to like his community, like the ghettos of Chicago, because like there's a lot of like loyalty in that community for people who came up from that community and all the things that go into that. And the chorus to that song, where he's talking about being falsely accused, these awful things, is he says, "Shower down on me, wet me with your love," and he like chants that over and over. And I read Jim DeRogatis, the main reporter who spent basically his career trying to hold R. Kelly accountable, basically from like 1998 or whatever up until 2015 or 2016 when Surviving R. Kelly came out, who talks about when that song came out, listening to it over and over and being like, oh, doesn't he realize how bad it makes him sound to like say those words publicly, how awkward that is? And then finally hitting him, it's like, oh no, that's why he's doing it. Like, he thinks it's funny.
And Brian, I think that point that you just had, I think really exemplifies the point that you made earlier about how this director really could have incorporated a lot more of the elements of, other, for lack of a better term, hip-hop freaks like R. Kelly and Jay-Z. It's one of those things where, this director made a 60-minute movie that's obviously based on Diddy, right? But like, you could have made an amalgamation of basically any popular rapper who had that level of like sex predation and made a more competent production. And, this movie is, once again, pretty competently made, especially for its budget and the kind of material that it is. I don't think it would be too much more to ask, maybe an extra $10,000 to film more scenes that would have been relevant to, once again, incorporating more of those elements in there. So, Mr. Alvin Gray, I have a challenge for you if you ever listen to this episode. And considering our track records on reviewing low-budget movies, he will find this and he will reach out to us. But Alvin Gray, I have a message for you. Make movies that are just like this, but incorporate even more elements that will be just as salacious. Because I guarantee you that if you were to have made this movie that had the R. Kelly moments, the Jay-Z moments, people are already watching this movie to see the exploitation elements of P. Diddy. They're going to want to see the elements of R. Kelly and Jay-Z and other people as well. So please incorporate more of those elements in your next exploitation film, please.
Yeah, I'm not going to criticize this movie for being an exploitation film because we love exploitation films here. We love exploiting. We love the exploitation. We love watching true stories be exploited by Hollywood grifters and Hollywood sickos. All we want is more. But truly, this is a competent film. I do want to say, I'm trying to balance what we say here because, again, this is the type of film. It's low budget. It's very independent, and the filmmakers do often see these reviews, and I want to be reasonable. It's competent. It is pretty boring. There's not really a lot of meat on these moments. It does do a pretty competent, retelling of American Psycho using kind of, it's Diddy, but it's like the muscles of Diddy laid over the skeleton of American Psycho. And it does that pretty competently with its, just just under an hour on time, but there isn't really any tension at any point in the film. It is a lot of conversation scenes of people talking, which, to be fair, there's a lot of in the original American Psycho, I suppose, so maybe that's intentional. Performances are pretty good. Yeah, I would love to see this expanded into like a bigger film about, grind set, kind of hustle culture and like black capitalism. There is potential there for something really interesting that's still bigger than hip hop.
Yes, I am basically going to reiterate and agree with basically all of your points here. Yeah, I did like this movie quite a bit. I actually watched this movie for the first time with my girlfriend. We just started dating, so I'm obviously...
Congratulations. Show off.
Hell yeah, dude.
That's an old something awful. I mean,
yeah,
whenever someone would say girlfriend, you would just quote the phrase, my girlfriend, and say congratulations.
But we watched this movie together, and both her and I would say, probably have the same level of like hip hop and rap knowledge, which is to say not too much, but we do obviously understand all the references. And she knew maybe like 10% more than me, but we were watching this movie and we were just flabbergasted that like the title of this movie is quite literally what it is. Like every moment when, B City, whose legal name in the movie is Sean Brush, and like also instead of
Sean
on the rocks, instead of Ciroc on the rocks, he's like, give me a B-Rock. Like they did everything possible to make this thinly veiled, and we thought it was so funny. We were laughing basically the entire way. So this is a great movie to watch with your girlfriend. Apparently,
this is the craziest thing they do. I was legit shocked they did this. They show actual album covers by Kanye West, Kid Cudi, and Rick Ross, and they just kind of blur them. But these are like iconic, very distinct looking album covers.
Did they do the Speeding Bullet to Heaven, or did they do a different one?
No, they do one of the Man on the Moon albums.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Because I was going to say that would be really funny.
I was shocked. They did Vultures 2 by Kanye, and I can't remember. It's a very recent Kanye album.
Oh, recent.
No.
Not Yeezy, right? No. Or not what? Yeezus.
No. I mean, the album is Vultures 2. I was shocked. They showed actual album covers and just put a blurry filter over them. And I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, so this movie is at the same time a lot of effort and competent, but also at the same time very low effort. It's awesome. It is the heightening of the contradictions of filmmaking in a way.
Yeah.
And once again, I want to be clear, Mr. Alvin Gray, who, once again, I almost guarantee you will listen to this episode or at least respond to us in some way. We don't hate this movie. We don't think you're a bad person. We think you have potential. We genuinely do.
Pretty competent movie. I don't think it's low effort. I think that there's a thing going on in current events. You see, like, the shit with Diddy, which is huge. That's a huge news story. There's a lot of dramatic potential there. And clearly, this filmmaker's thing is that he likes to comment on the culture, and he likes to kind of have his finger on the pulse, and he likes to he's kind of advantageous about, he's kind of ripped from the tabloids type filmmaking, which there is artistic value to. And he's like, well, we got to crank this film out, which you do when you're making a film that's that topical, that's serving that kind of function. You do kind of need to crank it out. So I can't begrudge him for that. But I would say, I think there is potential in this concept to be expanded on and to do something. You could take the American Psycho analog further, because the whole thing with American Psycho is that it's a criticism of like finance bro Reagan era culture. And you could make the Diddy parody of American Psycho also about that. You could make it the Bush era American Psycho about a rap mogul. And I think there's a lot of promise there.
Well, what's interesting, just real quick, Brian, obviously I made the joke about American Psycho and how a lot of obviously toxic online dipshits consider that movie to be very aspirational. But it was a movie directed by a woman, and the original story was written by a gay man. It was supposed to be a parody and a commentary, obviously, on like 80s like finance culture, and
also kind of a heavy-handed one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And real quick correction, Brian. It was actually released in 2000, so it would have been a Clinton era movie. Had to do it to you, Brian. I'm fucking around, but no, it was basically on the precipice of Bush.
What I mean is that the time it's parodying is the Reagan era. It's coming out.
Yes.
It's about that Wall Street era. Like, that's what Bret Easton Ellis was writing about.
Well, it's hilarious. Before I even knew what American Psycho was, when I was like a teenager, and I just saw the title and whatever, I thought it was an actual 80s movie until I actually watched it. I'm like, damn, Christian Bale he's like a vampire. He doesn't age.
Also, you're like, boy, if that was made in the 80s, that whole style, it would seem so revolutionary. It would be like the most influential film ever. You'd be like, oh my God, no film was written or filmed this way in the 80s. What was going on with this production?
No, absolutely. All right, but yes, so that is our review of African American Psycho, parenthetically the hip hop freak. So let's get into our pluggables before we end the episode. So as always, you can follow us you can follow me on twitter.com at Carlos Shantor. And as well, please follow us on both our Spotify and our YouTube channel, where we are uploading every episode simultaneously, about 2 to 4 episodes a month. Obviously, I can't guarantee you 15 episodes a month, but we will release every episode roughly every week or two. And as well as always, of course, we mentioned the, low budget movies that are free on YouTube, but our good friends Scott, Sean, and Robert are creating a fantastic series. And Brian, were you able to get back from Scott yet on if it's on pre-production or how's it going?
It's still in pre-production. They're tweaking the script. They have a general production time set that they're aiming for, but they're rewriting the script. There's work happening on it.
All right, excellent. And to all the people who haven't listened to every episode we've ever done within the last fucking 6 months, but we're of course talking about Lucifer and the Father. They have a GoFundMe out there. They have a crowdfund. It's about a quarter of the way through of getting their funding, but they're working on future episodes right now. So they are putting out a product. So we recommend now more than ever to donate to their fund, because they are putting out a product that people can watch on the internet for free. And there's not even a guarantee that they're getting those full funds yet. So they really believe in this fucking concept. And we are of course good friends with Scott, Sean, and Robert. We believe in their dream. And as always, if you donate to the fund, just send us an email, send us a YouTube comment, and we will, within reason, about $25 match that donation. So because we want their dreams to become a reality, we want to see future episodes of Lucifer and the Father, and we just believe in low budget independent filmmaking, which is why of course we just reviewed this fucking movie. And talk about people who obviously work outside the studio system. Of course, we believe in our good boy Luigi Mangione. Of course, we've been plugging his defense fund for a while. I think it's around $1 million last time I checked, which is a couple days ago. They're still trying to fuck him over. If this was any other case, this case would have gotten fucking thrown out, because there's been so much prosecutorial misconduct. The fucking paralegal on the prosecutor's team who listened to one of the calls with his lawyer, insane. Yeah. How is that allowed? And I mean, to be fair, that person was fired, but still, there's so much misconduct. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, in any sort of sensible society, this case would have been thrown out by this point.
But, of course, we're dealing with the current Trump administration, even though he was, charged and arrested during the tail end of the Biden administration. But at the same time, the Manhattan DA, the federal prosecutors, they still had the same purpose in mind, regardless who's in the administration. And they're trying to put him in the fucking chair or the gallows or the guillotine or whatever the fuck the Trump administration is going to do with the federal death row at this point. They're trying to kill Luigi with no evidence, with insane levels of prosecutorial misconduct. And once again, at this point, he is 100% not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It is more obvious than ever. They have nothing on him. And otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this shit.
Right, exactly. There's no argument to be made. This is a huge cultural sticking point for them. They're trying to send a message. And we've talked before about the groundswell of popular support that Luigi has. And it transcends politics. It transcends, and I know people say this all the time, and it's not usually true. It transcends left, right. It's a class issue. Everyone knows that he's being railroaded by this system with no evidence on him. And if they can do it to him, guess what? Especially, I mean, they were already doing it with Biden in office. With Trump in office, they're going to do it to you. They're going to do it to anyone they can. If they can do it to him, what stops them from doing it to any of us? I mean, what if you own a gun? What if you have a notebook? You know what I mean? What can they arrest you for? What can they, put you on fucking death row for now?
Yeah, it's absolute fucking ridiculousness. And now, of course, we're getting people deported without any due process. This is a really scary fucking time. And we need to stand by anybody like Luigi. Everybody like Luigi. Everybody who even has a smirk on their record. But once again, they deserve due process just like anybody else. And they deserve the presumption of innocence just like anybody else, as Luigi does, and fucking Kilmar does, and Mahmoud Khalil, and all these fucking people do.
Yeah, whether it's donating money, whether it's keeping things in the conscious, or just talking with people, or just meeting people in your community, takes time and it takes money and it takes a lot of labor to do activism. But you don't have to do that kind of activism. If it's even just meeting your neighbors in your community and not being atomized and alienated from them, so that you can actually work together to solve problems, that's something. But we all need to be getting better at doing those things. And I'm speaking for myself in that too.
No, absolutely. And, of course, just like with the Lucifer and the Father Father campaign. If you donate to the Luigi Defense Fund, we will match those donations up to a reasonable amount. Just once again, send us an email, send us a YouTube comment. We'll match those about $20-25 because, of course, we believe in Luigi. We have now both donated to the campaign, so we believe in it as well. And you know what, Brian, speaking of, once again, people work outside the studio system, of course, we have our own Patreon as well. We have some good perks on there. You know, our lowest perk gives you every episode 2 days early. So instead of releasing on Wednesday, release on Monday. And as I've always said, the first 48 hours count. So of course, you want to hear our discussions. You want to hear our thoughts on such films and albums as African American Psycho and New Wind and fucking Axum and all these things. You want to hear our thoughts before anybody else. So just give us $5 a month. We guarantee 2 to 4 episodes a month. That's anywhere between $2.50 to $1.25 per episode to hear us 48 hours early. That's crazy. That's the best value and content creation on the internet, in my opinion. Would you agree with that, Brian?
Of course, when all of your coworkers are waiting for the newest episode to come out, you'll be able to say, I just listened to Millennials Star Old and I heard all of the hot takes. Or you know what else you can do is you'll have heard it first. You can repeat all of our hot takes as if they are your own, and everyone will think you're a genius.
Exactly. 100%. And Brian, speaking of genius things, do you have some pluggables as well?
So you can again follow us at Millennials Are Old Pod. Millennials Are Old, simply, rather, is the Facebook page. Again, use that to keep track on insane boomer groups. I actually need to go in and see how the Billy Jack group is doing, because every time I check it now, they're really mad at each other. The Billy Jack group that is moderated by Tom's nephew is actually very calm, because he bans anyone that says anything that is pro-Trump or Republican or right wing. He's really got an iron fist lately with it, and more power to him. We love him. We love anyone supporting Tom Loffin's memory. You can also follow us at Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram and Threads. Probably, again, the best and most efficient way to reach me if you'd like to, threaten the show, if you'd like to argue with the show, if you'd like to compliment the show, if you would like to send me strange pictures, please don't do that. That is the most efficient way to reach us. Please also, if you want to send us any cringe millennial content, and again, I can't stress this enough, please do not send me episodes for the show and tell me that it's cringe millennial content. But we really do always want to see all of the awful cringe going online. It's too much to keep track of. I can't keep up with all of it. My brain is overheating from all of the cringe millennial content I see on Threads every day. So please help me filter out the chafe and just have the best of it.
Yes, I couldn't fucking agree more. And Brian, speaking of things that make me freaky, hip-hop makes me feel fucking freaky. So I am going to be a psycho in this country called America. And by that, I mean I'm going to probably fall asleep very soon because we're very tired and we're old.
That is psycho.
Yeah, with all our anxiety, just being able to just go...
being able to sleep comfortably.
Yeah, me, yeah.
Don't ask me why, but MSN is my homepage, and I just opened it up, and I just saw a headline from Harper's Bazaar. Kamala Harris is strong and classic in a black and white gown at the Met Gala. Shut the fuck up.
That makes me want to cosplay as Diddy's Joker and go, never mind, I don't want to get banned.
Now, what is she doing?
We already have the FBI agent.
What is she doing, like a Cruella de Vil cosplay?
Yeah, her and Pete Buttigieg. She'll be Cruella de Vil, and Pete Buttigieg will be the ones killing the dogs. Which, by the way, Brian, I don't know if you saw, but Pete Buttigieg is now doing, Dude Bro podcasts. He's running for government again. You know that.
Oh, he is getting strapped up. It's going to be Mayor Pete versus AOC in 2028, for sure.
It is. So, we have that bright future to look forward to, but at least for right now in the present, you and I are both going to go to sleep. So, have a good night, Brian. I'm going to be in this city falling asleep. So have a good night, everybody.
I think I'm going to listen to a bunch of records put out by Bad Boy and just remember the good times.
Hell yeah.
When I didn't have to hear about injustices.
Exactly. So have a good night, everybody. And next time we'll, of course, come back with a great episode as always.